Time now for the markets with Leighton, and Friday, July 10th brought the monthly crop report from the USDA.
But certainly no market mover like we had from the June 30th numbers that dropped U.S. corn and cotton acreage but projected record soybean acreage. But now to our headlines for this week in the markets. The incentive for processors to crush soybeans remains strong. Farm gate hog prices may be stabilizing, while the signs of struggling demand for beef may be developing. We begin in soybeans, where demand does not appear to be an issue. Old crop bean demand, in fact, seems to be stronger than many analysts ever anticipated. Trader Virgil Robinson says the incentive for processors to crush soybeans shows no signs of weakening.
So if the processor can in fact buy your old crop beans, he or she has the opportunity to immediately turn around and sell the co-product, the byproduct, and make a nice margin. And they'll continue to keep capacities running high as long as that's the economics warrant it. And then secondly, while we did see an old crop soybean sale canceled this week in the export sales report, up until this week they've been surprisingly strong. So a combination of good consumption and perhaps a smaller bean crop than what the USDA led us to believe here the last several months.
Time to break for the trivia quiz on Farm Week. It's National Ice Cream Month, and that, of course, brings us to a good question. How many pounds of whole milk does it take to make 1 gallon of ice cream? Is the answer A, 4 pounds, B, 8 pounds, C, 10 pounds, or D, 12 pounds? You'll find out the answer in a few more minutes. Pork export sales hit a marketing year high the last week of June, 39,000 tons. This according to the USDA. That is a jump of 90% from just the week before. But the bigger story in the hog sector these days is one of consolidation. Cargill is leaving the pork business. The buyer is JBS USA. Under the terms of a deal between these companies, JBS is taking over 2 processing plants and 5 feed mills. JBS, by the way, first got into the pork business in the United States 8 years ago when it purchased Swift & Company. JBS USA is also into chicken in this country. It is a majority shareholder in Pilgrim's Pride. Pilgrim's Pride is the 2nd largest poultry firm in the United States. The quarterly Hogs and Pigs report from the government on June 26th. It's being described in some quarters as bearish to this market, but there may be signs a price slide is easing up for pork. DTN senior market analyst Darren Newsom seems to think more stability may be just around the corner.
They could look to stabilize. I don't really see any reason to get overly optimistic on the hogs, but at least it could stabilize. I don't really see it rallying too soon out of here, but it may stabilize and maybe start to slow this slide that we have been on for quite some time.
Analyst Mark Schultz of North Star Commodities is one of the traders who call the latest cattle on feed report friendly to the beef sector. Extension Ag economist Brian Williams of Mississippi State has his own thoughts on what the numbers say. Well, Brian, let's begin by recapping the significant numbers from that report.
Well, just to run through the numbers, our placements were down 8.3% from a year ago, and then our cattle marketed was down 10.2% from a year ago, and then when you add those numbers up, our total number of cattle on feed was up about 0.6% from a year ago.
Well, would you say the overall impact from that report is major or minor as far as the markets are concerned?
It's a fairly minor impact on this report in particular. There wasn't really any major surprises. Placements were a little bit higher than expected, but otherwise everything was really in line with what the expectations were.
So kind of drilling down a little bit, does it appear fewer or more cattle are being kept out on pasture right now?
We're seeing a lot more cattle being kept in the pasture. Another thing that showed up in this report is the weight of the cattle being placed is still fairly heavy, and then we're also, so those cattle are being kept on grass longer, and then we're also seeing a lot more heifer retention this year than in years past.
And of course, we've heard a lot about heavy rains in many parts of the country in recent weeks. That I guess, has made feedlots less desirable as far as where the cattle are.
Yeah, the rain makes those feedlots real muddy, and that adds stress on the cattle, and they burn more energy trying to walk through the mud and stuff, and it decreases their efficiency, and they just don't gain weight as fast as they do if it were dry.
So are the futures going to be considered kind of friendly now, or I know we're a few days away from these numbers of this report coming out, but what kind of tone is that setting?
Well, the markets initially they were doing fairly good, but the last few days we've seen the futures come down. But on the other hand, the cash prices have been holding strong.
And feeder cattle, are we seeing pressure increasing on the feeders?
Yeah, the big thing with feeder cattle is the time of year. First of all, we're coming into fall. It's just right around the corner, and that's when we see a lot of cattle flood the markets. And then we're also seeing corn prices come up a little bit with all this rain again. It's got some concern about the planted acres, and so that's caused corn to come up, which has hit feeders on the bottom line.
The number of water acres devoted to catfish production is down in Mississippi. Extension Professor Jimmy Avery says the drop from last year amounts to about 8%. The government is estimating there are 41,000 acres of fish ponds in the state of Mississippi as of 2015. Avery says it was a good hatchery season in the state, with the demand for fingerlings to stock ponds with actually exceeding supply. Feed prices for farm-raised catfish are also said to be down, which is good for processors and farmers, down about $120 per ton this year. Well, we go back to trivia to wrap things up for this week in the markets. The right answer is D. It takes 12 pounds of whole milk to make 1 gallon of ice cream.